Hey folks, Ken Broadhagen here. You can check this article out on kenbroadhagen.net. You'll have some code that you can copy paste into your own API Gateway and Lambda. Also a little bit more background behind what exactly is going on with API Gateway and Lambda. But the topic today is returning a custom error status and error JSON object from API Gateway and Lambda. You definitely want to be returning the right HTTP status codes based on different errors that happen in your application. And I usually like to return some type of a JSON object with a little bit more details about the error. Especially in some cases, maybe you have several errors, like if you're submitting a user object and there are several different problems with the data that was submitted, you might want to return an array of errors. So that's the example I'm going to show you today, how to build a custom error object with your custom HTTP status code. Here's an example of what we're going to build. This here is Postman. It's an application for testing REST APIs, and as you can see here, I've made a request to my API Gateway function, and I got a 400 bad request as a response, and you can see the JSON here with all of the various error information. So the idea here is, let's say we were trying to add a user. Our API was to add a user, and we had a couple of different problems with the user data. There were some problems with the first name and some problems with the password. So we wanted to return an error structure that would enumerate all of those different problems and also return a 400 bad request to have the status code sort of match the nature of the error. Here's the Lambda code behind our custom error response. You can see it's pretty simple for this example. We declare the response object that we want. It contains a status property and then an errors array. And inside the errors array, we've got an object that represents kind of a detailed error here with some type of a code, a string to indicate sort of the source of where the error came from, a message that could be displayed, and some detail on that message. The example I'm using here is an error trying to add a user, and there's a problem with the first name and a couple of problems with the password. So once we have that error object, we call context fail to cause the Lambda to result in a failure, and we stringify the response with JSON stringify. And so you can see here the example of the output. The output is a JSON object with one property called error message, and the value is a string, and inside that string is the escaped JSON representation of our response object here. So it's a JSON document inside another JSON document. It seems like a few levels of inception there, but this is what you have to do to get API Gateway to extract out and present what you want. Here's our example API Gateway. All I've done here is made one get method off of the root, because this is just going to be a simple example of how to return the error response. And so there are two key places that we had to update. First is in method response. We need to add a response, and we need to actually add the HTTP status codes that we want to return. So in my example, I'm just showing 400. If you want to return several different status codes depending on your error, you're going to have to add each of them here. I know that's kind of a pain, but that's just the way that API Gateway works. The next place we need to go to is the integration response. So inside the integration response, this is where we take the result from Lambda and map it into the HTTP response from API Gateway. So we add a new integration response here, and what we need to do is paste in this status code here. So this regex is .star quote status quote colon 400 .star. Kind of a mouthful, but what this is going to do is it's going to look inside that error message. Remember, we saw the error message that Lambda is delivering, and it's going to look inside it for this status 400. It's actually going to look for the two quotes, the colon and the 400. And the dot stars you have on either side, those are wildcards, so they'll match whatever occurs in the rest of the document. So that way, if something were to come before or after this guy, the regex is still going to match. So even if a new property were added to the response and that came before status, the regex is still going to match because of these dot star wildcards we have here. And then also note, we don't have the slash escapes here. That's because those slashes are there to escape the string inside the JSON string, and we don't need to do that in this case. We're actually looking at what the raw data would be. Okay, so we've got this regex now set up. The next thing we need is a mapping template. So what API Gateway is going to do is when Lambda is going to give a response, it's going to apply this regex, and if it matches, then it will execute the mapping template. So we just need to add a mapping template. We need to add an application JSON mapping template because our response content is going to be JSON. So we add that. We select mapping template here, and you just need a little one-liner. That's the input path error message. What this does is there's some special functions inside the mapping template. So they'll take input, which is that that content that's coming back from the Lambda. So $input basically represents this entire result from the Lambda. And then the path function is going to sort of parse the JSON. And we give it this little string to look for, $.error message. So that says start at the root of the JSON document with $, and look for the error message property. So in our case, the root is here. Here's the error message property. And then that path function is going to extract the value, which is in this case it's a string, and it's going to render that as our response. And that's how you get your response to be rendered as JSON. We're extracting it from the error message property. It was already represented as a string. So once we've set up our mapping template here, make sure you save it with both the green check. Also save this blue button in case you updated the regex. And then finally you go and do a deploy. And once you've done your deploy, you should be able to just paste it in your browser. There we go. So here's your response. You've got a nice JSON document with all of your properties. You got a 400 bad request and all the headers you wanted. There you have it. Okay, thanks for tuning in today. Again, you can find me on kenbrodhaken.net. Follow the link below to the article. You'll have some code that you can use in your templates. And also wanted to send a special shout out to Leo and Damon for some of their comments below the blog. Damon helped us figure out how to do some of this stuff with Java instead of Node. It's a little bit different. And Leo helped another person find a link to returning a code other than 200 by default. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.